always built around teams. And the same goes for your online alpha. In this video, we will outline key roles you will need for a successful online alpha. Now, there are a few key roles that you're going to want to think about as you get started. Some of the big things you'll need help with is an MC to welcome people and put them at ease, hosts and helpers for the small groups, technical help, and a prayer team. First, you'll want to ask someone to serve as MC for the sessions. You'll need someone who brings energy and enthusiasm to the role, and who can keep the energy of the room fun and engaged. A good MC will greet people as they join the call, get people talking, and keep them engaged while others join in. They can also help with introducing the video and leading the transition into discussion groups. Equip your MC well with questions and icebreakers to engage the group. Then you'll want to have some people serve as hosts and helpers. If you've run Alpha before, invite people who attended the last Alpha to be hosts and helpers on your online one. They often make the best helpers because they understand what it's like being a guest on Alpha. The role of host and helper doesn't change much online though. The group host may need to be a bit more dynamic and energetic to help maintain the energy within the small group. We suggest having stronger leaders in your small group to lead discussion. Your helpers can help monitor the chat window for any comments. This platform may help your quieter guests speak up and participate in discussion through the chat function. Some churches have found that guests participating in online alpha are willing to be more vulnerable, and groups may delve into deeper conversation more quickly. So prepare your team for that too. Then get a technical helper. If the MC brings the fun, this person brings the function. Having someone working behind the scenes to handle everything from sharing the video to creating breakout rooms and troubleshooting tech issues with guests is critical to the success of your online alpha. This person needs to be very comfortable with the platform you choose and needs to understand the functionality of it all. Building a prayer team for your online alpha is just as important as building a prayer team for your in-person alpha. You will need people supporting you and your team behind the scenes and praying for God to move powerfully in the lives of your guests. Your prayer team can be on their own call or offline praying during your alpha session. Once your alpha begins, connect with your team every week. Most teams meet together about 30 minutes before each session to worship and pray together and encourage one another about what God is doing. Usually, the leader will give the team a heads up on what to expect in that session. Communicate with your team throughout the week, maybe in an email or text message, reminding them to pray for their guests and let them know about any important details for the next session. Last, take all of your team members through the Alpha Team training sessions. Even if some of your volunteers have done the training before, we suggest that everyone attend. It's a great refresher and ensures that everyone is on the same page and feels like a team. We encourage you to run the training every time you run Alpha, and the same goes for Alpha Online. And you could run your training just like an Alpha night, where you gather your team online, have fun together, and discuss. It's a great way to give your team a sense of what the first session of Alpha Online will be like. All of this is about empowering ordinary people to be part of this extraordinary work in this extraordinary time. So take some time now to think of a few people that would be a good fit for your team and write down their names.
Stephen Foster, and we want to look now at how to make sure we have open discussion on Alpha Online. Now, I feel the first thing is to make sure that your guests feel welcome and relaxed. Now, that's helped by the fact that they're normally joining from the comfort of their own home with an Alpha Online. So they're already feeling a bit more relaxed. But when they ping up in your video conferencing app and you see their faces for the first time, it really helps to give them a warm welcome. And they might be pinging up all at the same time or quite quickly after each other. So I find just make sure you focus on the most recent person who's joined the call. Make sure they feel welcome. Ask them, say hi, how's it going? The great thing is, on most video conferencing apps, their name will pop up when they arrive. So you instantly know their name. You're not having to force yourself to remember their name. And you can focus on, asking them how their day has been, asking them a little bit about how they're finding social isolation, if that's their context, asking them how things are going. And then you can introduce them to the other people in the small group who have already got there. And I find that initial connection, if you can get it right, really helps open discussion from that point onwards. And then we normally start with some sort of game. So I'm asking people at the moment, if you had a get out of jail free card tomorrow, if you could go anywhere in the world for the day and you could jump on a flight, where would you go and why? And I'm normally for that's a connection point that enables people to kind of share a little bit about themselves, but it's also quite a fun thing to do, because who doesn't want to get on a plane at the moment and go to a beautiful beach and just be able to get out of your house a bit? So that's normally quite a fun way of doing it. But then the other thing that's really interesting about Alpha Online, and this is why I think helpers have never been more important, is on most video conferencing apps, you can see everyone's faces at the same time. So it's really useful for a helper to be looking around the group and seeing if someone's just about to speak. Because one of the dangers is everyone's a bit nervous about speaking because they don't want to cut across someone. But the flip side is that you can see at the same time, and you can see if someone's just about to make a point. And then you can come back to them and say, oh, Jane, were you just about to say something? And that really helps the conversation flow. And generally speaking, people, because they're using video conferencing apps all the time for work or in other contexts, they're becoming much and much more aware of how to communicate well through those apps. But at the start, you might just have to give the small group a bit more of a steer. You might have to draw on people slightly more intentionally than you would in an alpha small group. You might have to ask people a few more direct questions, draw some people out a little bit more to make sure they feel part of the conversation and part of the open discussion. But actually, I've found that it's just as fun. And actually, I've had 3 of the best small groups I've ever had on Alpha over the last 3 weeks doing Alpha Online. I found that the conversation has really flowed. People have been really open because they're comfortable, they're coming from the comfort of their own home. And there's something about the kind of immersive nature of video conferencing apps that enables people to connect actually quite quickly with where other people are coming from and really add something to the dynamics of an alpha discussion in a small group. So go with confidence. It's possible to have really open discussion and conversation in an Alpha Online small group.
Hi, my name is John Wentz, and I'm here to talk to you about how to manage your Alpha small group online. If you can manage the small group time on your Alpha in a really strong and positive way, then your guests are going to have a great Alpha experience, and you're going to love your Alpha experience as well. So I want to talk to you about 3 types of advice. First, things to keep in mind before you launch Alpha. Secondly, tips for hosts and helpers or anybody helping in a small group. And third, the 3 most common challenges that we come up against on any Alpha small group. So first of all, before you launch Alpha, you're going to want to keep in mind that small groups are meant to stay together week after week. So keep people in the same small group, and they will grow in relationship and friendship and be much more open to share and become friends with people throughout the weeks. Secondly, you're going to want to keep your Alpha small groups to a manageable size, especially online. In person, we recommend having groups of 12 with 8 guests, 2 hosts, and 2 helpers. But online, you might reduce that by a few just so that everyone has an opportunity to share. So maybe consider 1 host, 1 helper, and 6 to 8 guests. The third thing you might want to keep in mind before you launch your Alpha is how you're going to place people into their small groups. I like to think through intentionally who goes in each group. So we use a pre-registration form where people give us their information and they can self-identify where they're at on their spiritual journey so that we can make sure that they have a great small group experience. We find that using categories like atheist, agnostic, Muslim, Buddhist, new Christian, sort of Christian, growing Christian are helpful categories. Really what we're looking for is anyone who checks the box growing Christian. We put all those people in small groups together because they are used to having a little bit deeper discussion, and everyone else who's still exploring faith or maybe new to faith tends to play really well together. So think through intentionally how you're going to place people in groups, and you can be proactive to managing your small group in a really positive way. Now, a couple simple tips for anybody who's hosting a small group or helping in an Alpha small group. Number one, as people come into small groups on Alpha Online, you're going to want to make sure that they actually know how to use the platform that you're on. So if it's Zoom, for example, make sure to give some space for the guests to learn how to mute, unmute, start or stop their video, and that they know how to be able to see all the other guests in their small group. Make sure that they know how to change their name and so on and so forth. It's really helpful for them to feel comfortable in the small group. The second thing is that it's helpful to lay down some guidelines for the group discussion. I like to think through the acronym of PRE, P-R-E, before the group discussion takes place. One, we want to give people an opportunity to participate. That's the P. And so if you're a long talker, be mindful not to dominate the discussion. The R is for respect. We want to respect everybody's point of view, even if they share something that you don't necessarily agree with. And the E is for encouragement. We want to encourage everybody in our small group. So if you can remind your small group each week of your pre-arranged guidelines, it will help in the discussion. Now, a couple of other tips. You're going to be mindful of your body language as a small group host or helper online. So sit close to the camera. Don't back way away from the camera like this because it's a little bit difficult to see your facial expressions. But come close, especially online. It's so important to be able to see your face. Make sure that you're well lit and that people can see how you're responding. Your body language, even using your hands, can be really helpful online. And the last tip for hosts and helpers is that in the small group discussion online, it's really helpful to actually call on whoever you want to answer the question. That'll give them a moment to unmute, or you can unmute them if that is needed. Now, the most common challenges that we tend to find in Alpha small groups are, number one, the long talker, somebody who rambles on and on in the small group time. If you encounter a long talker, it's really helpful to simply interrupt. Interrupt them for the sake of the group. The group's going to be wanting you as a host or a helper who has authority to do this, to step in and rescue the group. You might use a phrase like, "John, that's really great, and we love hearing what you're saying, but I want to be mindful of the time, and I want to be able to hear from everyone else in the group. So, Sandy, what do you think about that?" Secondly, you might come across groups that find it difficult to open up. Maybe they're more quiet than usual. And on Zoom, when things are quiet, when things are silent, it actually feels a little extra awkward. So you might use an exercise like the 3x5 tool, which is simply a question to say, what are 3 things in the last 5 years that have shaped you as a person? We'd love to hear from everybody. So let's just take a couple minutes. You can turn your video off and think through the last 5 years. What are 3 things that have really shaped you as a person? And when you're ready to share, just turn your video back on and we'll go around the group and give everyone a chance to participate. I found that when groups do this, people open up, they feel known, they feel seen and heard, and they have a better understanding of who's in the group with them. After they do something like that, discussion tends to go way easier. Now, the third common challenge that you'll find in a group is that sometimes there's people that like to interrupt or try to correct what people think. Sometimes this happens with people who are familiar with church or maybe know a little bit enough to know that when somebody says that they think that God is a rock, they want to correct that person's point of view. And it's helpful to remind that person of your prearranged guidelines to say, we want to respect what everyone has to say. And Alpha is really about hearing everyone's point of view. And we want to learn and give everyone an opportunity to self-discover what they think about things. So, John, thanks for sharing that. But let's really try to understand why Steve thinks that. And you can hear from Steve and give that person a little bit more space. So there's a couple tips for you on managing your Alpha small groups. Again, the most important thing is to pray for your guests as often as you can. Have fun every week in your small group. Use those icebreaker questions and activities and have a great time. Over the weeks, you'll find that as people get closer together, you'll have a little bit of back and forth, some objections here and there, but trust will be built. People will fall in love with each other, and you're going to have a blast on Alpha with your guests. So God bless and have a great time.